Tunafurahia undugu na uko wetu, na sherekea
kazi na bidii yetu, tuvute pamoja, tushirikiane.
Mr. Michael Joseph, CEO of Safaricom, thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to interview you. Thanks once again.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Michael, might I start the story where it all started?
It was quite interesting because I came to the country in June 2000 and we didn't have any offices. We rented a flat in Norfolk Towers. There was all of us in this office. There were 5 of us from Vodafone at the time. And, we had one driver, and this is where we started the whole business. And, we started just with these very few people. And we inherited, a network from Telecom Kenya, and we were about to take on Telecom Kenya staff that were going to be transferred from the Safaricom division, as it was then, or department, into Safaricom. So it was a very inauspicious start. I don't think any of us realized how big it was ever going to get. And so we all crammed in this office, and then we hired more people. In fact, my PA, Tabby, was our first hire. She came to the door, and we hired her, and then the office got more and more crowded. But that's where we started. And, it's a very inauspicious beginnings.
How many employees do you have today?
Now we have about 3,200 employees at the moment. Yeah.
Okay.
So we started with 5, we're now 3,200, nearly 10 years later.
This business started off as a voice business. It's now, we were at lunch that day with the IMF chief economist, and he asked you, I think, Mr. Lin said, what do you see your company in 5 years' time? And you said, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I see it as a data company.
Yeah, I think in 5 years' time, or even less, I see this being as a telecommunications company, and with data being a big proportion of our revenue, because we have until 2008 we were a mobile company, pure mobile play. We are still dominantly a mobile company. 80% of our revenue is still from mobile devices. But 20% is going to come from fixed data devices in the future, and it's going to continue to grow that way. Because if you look at Kenya, and you look at, first of all, the availability of internet access to the average Kenyan is very small. Less than 5%, maybe 10% sometimes people say, have access to the internet. Our literacy rate is very high, over 60%. We have a literacy rate of over 65%. So that means that our population can use the internet, but we haven't been able to give it to them. And I believe that's what's going to drive us. I think we're heading for a data revolution. Once again, for me, for my company, for me, it's in the consumer. Yes, in the consumer, of course, corporates will play a big part in it, and I am in all the top 200 corporates. I probably have 98% market share, but I think in the consumer market is where the data revolution is going to come. It was hard, but I always knew that the value of the company was not reflected in the share price. I don't think anybody, not even you, maybe understands how the share market works and what drives people to buy or sell shares and what affects the price. Who knows? Sometimes I have no idea. I think I do, and then as soon as I think I do, then something else happens, and I don't know anymore. I didn't expect it to come around this quickly, actually.
Did you not?
No, I didn't. I didn't think it would come around this quickly. It actually started to turn around on our last roadshow.
That's right.
When Les Bailey and myself were traveling around the world, selling Safaricom or talking about the half-year results. Many people that we spoke to, investors we spoke to, were investors we spoke to in the first round when we did the IPO, but they were skeptical about Safaricom.
Yes.
They were skeptical about the country, about the economy and things like that. And then we went through this very bad economic situation. And then during this last phase, I think they saw that Kenya did not suffer as much as many other countries had suffered, that Safaricom was still performing well, despite the price wars that we had in 2008, and they saw that they were not so emotionally concerned about 2012 as most Kenyans are, and they took a pragmatic view.
I heard you say that. Yeah. What was the point you're making there?
Well, I'm saying that for investors, international investors, they want to see the soundness of the company that they're investing in, the soundness of the environment in which they're investing in, and politics, or as we see them in the daily newspapers, is not so important to them. As long as they feel that there's continuity within the economic and financial policies of the country, they're not so concerned about who's president, who's not president, or that kind of thing.
From my perspective, I look at it and I think Safaricom is a bigger story than sometimes we really appreciate. And for me, it's a huge story. I couldn't have come home and plugged myself and done the things I'm doing today without them. Looking at what Safaricom have done, I was working on a report with the World Bank which just come out, and that report is called The Tipping Point, Kenya, the Tipping Point. And I remember thinking to myself, how often does the World Bank put out a comment such as that, a tipping point? You can go through all their literature for 100 years. The tipping point is like a really extreme comment. You said that revolution only comes, I think, if I remember correctly, when we get a data-enabled device. Yeah. What is the tipping point for that revolution you're talking about?
I think around below $200.
Internet-enabled.
Internet-enabled device, not an internet. To be more specific, a netbook, a laptop, netbook type device, data-enabled. I think when it drops below $200, I'm saying between $150 and $180. I think that's the tipping point.
And I think we're in a laboratory experiment, that the people responsible for that laboratory experiment are in front of us here, Michael and Bob, in so many ways. They were the ones who took the bet that Kenya, you could bet $1 billion in Kenya and get a return when no one else really would have done that. The people keep saying to Bob, you're following in Michael's footsteps, and Nyayo was the old President Moi philosophy. It's not about following in anyone's footsteps. It's about being given the cars to the fastest, biggest car in the whole of the country. Welcome.
I'm 52 years old. I look considerably younger than that. I am married. I have 2 children. I'm the CEO of Safaricom. I've lived in Johannesburg, Japan, the UK, and I was born in Guyana. I think that's it. There's nothing else to say. I thought it would be useful really to share with you where we as Safaricom see the future. Who are we? Most of you, well, you all know Safaricom, which is why you're here. But our intention is to leverage the strength of our people, our innovation, and we have a history of innovation here in Kenya, and the reach of our technology. We are the most technologically advanced company in the country in order to drive social and economic change. Of course, we drive financial performance. But the thing which differentiates Safaricom from most other mobile operators around the world is the impact that we have made in terms of creating social change here in Kenya.
Bob Collymore, Chief Executive Officer, Safaricom. Good to see you as always, Bob.
It's great when you call me that, because I know you personally. When you call me Chief Executive, it sounds really important.
No, but you are. And I value the friendship as well. Bob, I asked you just before we started how long you'd been in the seat for, and I think you said nearly 48 months.
I came into country at the end of, actually the week of the promulgation of the Constitution.
Yes.
Which was the end of August. And then I took the reins from Michael the 1st of November. So, yeah.
So we're nearly there. And I was looking back at the share price. I was recalling the time that was. Revenue last year, full year, was up 16.4% without putting any numbers. Are we on trajectory here for a similar outcome, do you think?
There's certainly headwinds. We give some guidance at the full year, and we're sticking with those guidance. Okay, so we're pretty confident.
That was pretty confident guidance.
Yeah. So, we're not expecting to see much in the way of variation there.
People love your stock because of the dividend, including my father. And say he will kill me if I don't ask you. He says, is his dividend intact?
The dividend is, we've kept a bit of money back. So we're paying out 85%.
Yes.
The capex on the police project, when that finally comes through, it'll be back end of the year or maybe even next year. So I don't see that that's going to have a dent in the dividend. The dividend is a progressive dividend policy.
Yes.
And we expect to pay more next year.
Yes.
I mean, it's not the time to be declaring dividend, but we expect to pay more next year than we did this year.
Excellent. Well, that's sufficient. Now, can I go to M-Pesa, which obviously has been this fantastic mobile money story. It's practically rebranded Kenya. It's grown exponentially, in point of fact. I mean, I think the last full year results, we were talking revenues up 21.61% at 26.56 billion, which is nearly $300 million. How do you characterize this space? I mean, I know it's fluid.
Underexploited.
Underexploited.
Underexploited is how I'd characterize it. More than 90% of transactions are currently cash.
Yes. I saw that. You said that one day. I was astonished.
And therefore, there's all that market to go for. So I keep saying I think the market is plenty big enough.
Yes.
And with an innovative approach, then I think new players can easily come into this market and take a slice of that market. Our share of the market, of course, will shrink over time. But then the market will grow.
You're saying the pie is getting bigger.
The pie will get much bigger. I think the market is big enough for several players, not just two players. It's just that people haven't been very good in coming into the market so far. M-Pesa is still taking 98% of
the
all mobile money.
Yes.
That's not sustainable in the long run. I mean, you can't continue like that. We've often said that M-Pesa is not a banking product.
Yes.
It supplements and complements banking products, which we've done with KCB and with CBA. But in itself is a payment product. Lipa and M-Pesa is taking more, Lipa and M-Pesa, which is the merchant payment system, is taking more than 50% of all the electronic payments in the country today.
Already?
So if you look at the statistics reported by Central Bank,
yes,
you can see what the banks are doing in electronic payments.
Yes.
And then we know what we're doing. So we're doing more than 50% of that. And yes, but at half year, I think we said we had already signed up some 110, 120,000 merchants. And our trick was now to get more of those merchants using it. And so the ones who are using it have grown how much they're using per day. And then we are constantly activating the dormant ones.
Now, coming down to a couple of other segments, mobile data, I remember your CFO talking about an inflection point.
We were a little bit lazy for a little bit too long. When I first took the reins, I remember Michael saying to me, what we have to drive now is mobile data. And I think we were a bit slow in picking that one up. So last year, mobile data grew by 43%, something like that.
Yes.
And we were pretty pleased with that because that was kind of the first time we started to see that inflection point. But actually, when we looked at some of our partner networks, when we looked at the South Africans, for example.
This is Vodacom.
We realized that actually our performance wasn't that good.
Yes. But were they starting from the same level as you were?
No, they started earlier, but they were still seeing year-on-year growth, which was higher than 43%. And so as a team, we kind of went back to it and said, no, guys, we're being a little bit lazy. And so we're pushing much harder on mobile data this year. The half-year results will be announced in about 6 weeks' time, and so you'll see how that's panning out. But the real things which are driving that is smartphones. We find that once you move someone, even from a feature phone, and a feature phone would be like a BlackBerry.
Yes.
Even moving them from a feature phone to a smartphone, the average revenue generated by that customer can multiply by as much as 4 times.
Is that right?
Yeah. Because what you've got is a smartphone.
Because you're being more compulsive.
Much more utility. You want to check the weather. You want to check. You will be checking share prices constantly.
Yes, I do.
Even if you're sitting, sometimes you're sitting in the cafe and you hear a piece of music and you think, what is that? And then you go into SoundHound. And so there's a lot more utility, and young people are using it a lot. But we mustn't forget what I think in the UK we used to call the silver surfers, people with silver hair who've got a lot of time, who are kind of surfing the net. So that puts a lot of strain on the network, and that's why we're investing last year we invested 27 billion shillings.
Yes.
This year, I've got my budget meeting after this actually, but this year we are planning to invest 30 or more
Yes.
billion shillings just to keep this network up and big. And I know, we'll talk a little bit about spectrum and stuff in a
Yes.
minute, but they're all investments which you have to then pour in order to serve the smartphone market.
Thank you very much, Bob.
You're very welcome.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Yeah.